at you all the way from our dorm rooms to your conference rooms. Saba, Ali, and Dan Teeman here are two college students who are ready to talk to you guys about business and lifestyle from our personal experiences.
Each week we'll discuss about our lifestyle as college students as well as our tips and strategies starting in the business field. We'll bring on successful entrepreneurs in the millennial generation to share with us their journey and how they got started and where they're at now.
Our goal is to help you students, millennials, and entrepreneurs gain inspirational advice by our spontaneous conversations and meaningful guidance. Let's dive on in.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 66 of Dorm Rooms and Conference Rooms. And guys, as always on our Friday specials, we have another amazing guest on. But to get us going as always, Saba, how are you?
I am doing great. Super excited to have our guest on today. So let's get started, Dan.
Yeah, guys, we have Case Kenny on. He's the co-founder of Trep Media Group, a media company that creates experience based on content for millennials, the founder and editor-in-chief of Pursuit.com, co-host of Forbes' top-ranked podcast, The Hustle Sold Separately, and the founder of 216 Ventures. So, Case, I know that was such a little tidbit about yourself, but how are you doing today, man?
I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Of course. So kind of get us going here. Kind of give us more about yourself. Kind of tell us what you're doing these days and what's new.
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I've certainly got a lot of things going on. I think everything kind of relates back to what you said in the introduction, which is Trep Media Group. So it's the company I co-founded with Matt Gottesman, who actually was on previously on your show, which was great. So you should definitely check that out if you're listening. But we founded the company Trep Media Group on this idea of experience-based content. So, I've been in the publishing game for a while. Matt and I have both been digital marketers for a while, but we kind of noticed this gap as far as people who are producing content that wasn't really based on experiences, right? Think of things like any BuzzFeed list, any one of the many numerous social media or e-commerce gurus, right? They're spitting advice at you. They're telling you things to do, but they're really not reflecting on the reasons that they believe you should do it. So that experience aspect, right? So I created Pursuit, which is a daily publication. And that was with the idea of every piece of content that is on there should be related to the author's experience, right? Here's what happened to me, and then here's the takeaway, right? So we produce a lot of content that way. Then Matt and I met, and then we created a podcast together called The Hustle Sold Separately, which took off pretty quick and was pretty humbling. We were, doing quite well on that. And that was the idea of documenting people's journeys, right? Not talking about their successes, not necessarily talking about their failures either, but just talking about literally all the things that they're doing on their journey, right? So this idea of taking this notion of end success out of the picture and just talking about their journey. So kind of with those elements, and then Matt has his own publication, HDF Magazine, we decided to create a larger company around that. Since we had so many assets, we were reaching, between 10 and 20 million people a month. It made sense to come together, create a larger company, and go from there. So really everything I do kind of revolves around Trep Media Group. I also have some other things in the work. I've got my own consulting company, 216 Ventures, and that's me on my own going out and doing consulting, but it's all relative to this idea of experience-based. So everything I do for consulting is around that concept. And I've got some other e-commerce brands that I run as well. But the easy answer is, what I've got going on is all relative to Trep, and that's kind of the core value that I push forward in everything that I do.
Awesome. So kind of take us back to the beginning. When you first started getting into entrepreneurship, where were you in your life?
Yeah, so I was in Chicago. I just moved here. So this is in 2011. I just moved here and I started working at some of the ad agencies in Chicago. So Chicago is a great ad scene, great agency scene, a lot of big agencies here. Definitely have nothing against them, but I was working at one in particular, and it was my job to help the large Fortune 500 company that I was working on engage with millennials. That was the kind of the call that I was that I had my responsibility towards. And as part of that role, I was working with basically every quote millennial publication, right? So every BuzzFeed, Elite Daily. I was working with Condé Nast and all those different publications, and we were trying to create clever ways to engage with this audience. And I just kind of looked at myself, I was like, is this really the type of content that that motivates me, that I like and I enjoy? And the answer is no. I started asking around my peers, like no one really engaged with this content. Yeah, the content was entertaining, but it really meant nothing to me. So like that's kind of a problem. And at the same time, I've always been a pretty voracious reader and writer. So I was kind of just looking for a creative outlet. So I started Pursuit.com 2012-ish. There are a couple pivots along the way as I kind of figured I didn't know anything about blogging, I didn't know anything about online publishing. So I started that then kind of out of that frustration, and really things kind of just took off from there. Got some good press, got in Forbes, got in Inc., got in Entrepreneur, CBS, WGN, Chicago Tribune. And then along the way, I ended up meeting Matt on Instagram of all places. And that's then, we kind of realized we had similar visions, and that's where we started creating brands together. I think the biggest thing I've learned is, you can create one channel call it a publication, for example, but really the real growth happens when you create multiple channels. It happens when you team up with people with similar visions, with also that bring additional distribution to the table. I think once you figure out distribution in the online game as a digital marketer, there's really nothing you can't do. So as a result of the distribution that Matt and I brought to the table, we've created, a lot of other brands around that and different projects. So kind of it all stemmed from that initial moment back at the agency side, and then met up with Matt, and we've got two other partners, Adam and Matthew Torin as well. They created youngentrepreneur.com. They're kind of powerhouse guys in that space, and honestly, things kind of just have taken off from there.
Okay, so what was the transition like when you left your job to start Pursuit? So did you actually leave your job to start Pursuit, or did you start it while you were still working at that advertising agency?
Yeah, so here's the fun part. So that was, 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't leave. I certainly bounced around to other jobs, but I never left. And to this day, I still have my 9 to 5, which is something that I talk a lot about because I'm pretty passionate about the idea of side hustles and, leveraging 9 to 5 skill sets for your side hustle. So I'm happy to talk about that. So I still have a job. I'm the sales director for a large technology company in Chicago. So I do that full time, technically, quote, full time. And then I have all these other ventures on the side. And I'm pretty passionate and adamant about this approach to entrepreneurship. I think a lot of people, you talk to people, are like, oh, you're not an entrepreneur unless you're fully dedicated, unless you jump in, like you have a safety net. Like, that's not right. You're not an entrepreneur. And I just think that's such a myopic way of looking at things. I think it's like, and I think a lot of people, I think that's like the popular notion. People like to say, oh, I grabbed life by the balls. I'm an entrepreneur. I went all in, right? I think it's cool, like a cool thing to say, right? And I think the reality is sometimes you need to be a realist. I think like financially, like responsibility wise, it's not always the easiest thing to do. So that's one aspect of it. And I think the other aspect of it, the reason I'm so content with continuing to build my side hustles, and I just spent 10 minutes going through them. There's a lot. The reason I'm content doing the side hustles and then also working full time is these skill sets that I have on both are so transferable. And certainly I think I'm very unique in that I have a 9 to 5 where I'm doing marketing and technology and sales and business development, that every single hour of my 9 to 5 is easily relatable to every single hour of my side hustle and vice versa. So it's making me such a stronger person. I think that's rare, but I think I really advocate for a person to find a 9 to 5 that relates to what they're doing on their side hustle, and it'll make you a monster. Like I've got so much going on. Like I get so many consulting offers because of this marketability of myself as an entrepreneur and also as a 9 to 5er. Like it just kills it. And eventually, to be clear, I'm going to do Trep and I'm going to do Pursuit and I'm going to do all my other things full time eventually. But I'm just getting so much value right now from this skill set that when I make that move, it's like combining 30 years worth of experience into 8. So long-winded way to answer your question is no, I never quit. I don't think it made sense. Certainly there are situations where it does make sense, but as someone who was new to entrepreneurship, new to digital marketing, new to everything, and just didn't have that network, didn't have that experience, it made sense for me to continue doing both.
That's
There you go.
awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's so, you hear so many people like say like, yeah, I quit my 9 to 5 and all this stuff, and now I'm a real entrepreneur and all that, those things. I love the fact that you still work your regular day job and then you do your stuff on the side and you kind of are just growing everything that way. Like that's actually really awesome. Like you said, it's a twist that really no one, hears about, and it's something that you really put on the front burner, and you show people like what you do and how it's really transferable. But
Yeah. I think just real quick on that, I think like there's also this like, and not to make it about money, but like entrepreneurship, like your goal is to scale a business and make money, right? Like last year, I did over 6 figures on my side hustle with Matt, like, and that it was like fairly easy what we did. Like I can only imagine if we were a little smarter with what we did. And like this year we're gonna kill it and do even better. And I'm touting like crazy. And again, I'm actually a pretty humble guy, so I'm coming across here as a little bit not so much, but I'm just trying to get this across because I'm really passionate about this idea of side hustle. But like I command some like pretty crazy rates for consulting, things that like I charge between like $200 and $350 an hour on my consulting, and that's because brands and my clients buy into this unified vision of someone who has all this experience, and like experience trumps everything in this day and age. Like when you jump into your side hustle full time and you quit your 9 to 5 and you're going into it, you're channeling yourself into one channel, which is great. You're going to be very effective there. But at the same time, you're casting aside all the experience and value that you can get from whatever you were doing previously. And I've hung on to that, and I think it's made me so much stronger, and it's put a really good head on my shoulders. It's certainly it's increased my network. So I'll leave it at that. But I just think there's a lot of I think people just need to not be so nearsighted. I think people should be really enthusiastic, continue that learning process, and sometimes that means sticking it out. Other times maybe not so much. Like I can understand if you're say working I don't know in an audit at like Deloitte or something like that, and you're trying to start like the sweater brand on the side, like they're not that aligned, right? But like if you can align them, I think you can really crush it. So I'll leave it there.
Quick question about that. Actually, we're not going to leave it there, but did you ever have come into a problem where the company was giving you like grief for having a business as well? Did you ever like see that at all, or did they encourage you like, hey, that's awesome, like you got to work this, focus on us from 9 to 5 or whatever it is, but we're cool with you also doing your own thing?
Yeah, so a couple times, yes. I will say again, I'm very fortunate and very humbled to like be in the company that I am. I got in early. I have equity in the company. Like, it was just a lot of great things happen that I'm extremely grateful for. And I'm in sales, so it's a little bit black and white. It's like if you're doing well, no one's gonna bother you. If you're not, you're in big trouble. So fortunately, I've been good at sales for a while, and I've been fortunate to not have that worry. But yeah, I mean, all the time. Like for example, I do the podcast every Friday, and I do it at noon, right? So right in the middle of the day. There's been a lot of times where I've had to call Matt up and be like, "Hey, I can't go today. I've got a meeting. I can't do it. I can't cancel it." So a lot of times where I've had to make sacrifices. But I think the management, like the company that I work for, again, being strategic with it. It was a startup. It's grown very, very past that at this point. But the management and the executives in the company, a lot of them have their own side hustles, and a lot of them are investors in large companies and angel investors. So the culture is definitely there that's accepting of that. But I've gotten sat down before and told, hey, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you working on Pursuit? Like, you work here, and like, I totally get that. And it is. If you do the 9 to 5 side hustle thing, you have to be extremely respectful of who you work for, right? You can't be slacking on the job to try to work your side hustle. You have to find the hours outside of work. I don't know, take 15 minutes during the day if you need to, do it over your lunch break if you need to. But when you're working a 9 to 5, you need to be respectful of that person who's paying you that money. I think Gary V had an interview. He was talking about this concept, and he said that the goal should be to find a 9 to 5 where you do the least and get paid the most, right? So you can work on your side hustle. And I'm certainly not saying that I do the least at my job, but it's the work smarter, not harder mentality, right? So if you can find a 9 to 5 that pays you good money, allows you to pay the bills, allows you to take care of your responsibilities, but that lets you leave right at 5, then you're golden. I mean, if you can work 9 to 5 and then you can from 6 to 12, 6 to 2, whatever you can do, that's huge, But if you're doing, I keep talking about consulting, but if you do work for like a big four and you're working 8 to 10, 8 to 8, you're working 12, 14-hour days, it's going to be a lot more tricky. So again, there's a lot of decisions that can be made, and not everyone has that flexibility, but if you can, try to align it with that mentality of finding a culture that's accepting of it, that gives you the time, and that allows you to take the financial responsibility off the table.
Yeah, the reason I really am actually into it right now is because I actually am starting a job here in a week or so for an advertising agency as well. But on the sales end of it all, just because I want to get in, I'm interested in advertising. Like you said, you're digital marketers as well as I am. So, that's where I'll learn more things about digital marketing, but I like to do the sales end. And my partner does all the, creating the ads and creating all that stuff. So it works out perfect where I learn how to sell better over the phone, because if you are in phone sales, you could sell anywhere in the world, basically.
Exactly.
And that's part of why I wanted to get, before I was working an outside sales job, and I was like, well, this is great. I'm going to interact with people, but hey, I'd rather learn phone sales. They'll teach me scripts. They'll teach me how to word things. And all that is kind of what I need to learn at such a young age to really, further myself in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the biggest skill that any entrepreneur should learn is sales. I mean, there is no entrepreneur that I know that isn't good at sales. I mean, you talk about like Mark Zuckerberg and some of those guys who are very just like, the technical side, and, kind of had to learn that on the fly. But the best entrepreneurs are the best salespeople. So if you can learn that skill at your 9 to 5 and then apply it to your side hustle, and then eventually transition full time, that should be the goal. Like, I used to be horrible at sales, and now I'm, one of the top salespeople. I've got a whole team, and, that just fires me up, because now I can go home and I apply that same mentality to selling my company. So it really works.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So kind of moving forward now. So how did you actually meet Matt and get into starting Trep?
Yeah. So I met him on Instagram, kind of slid into the DM as it is in the millennial world. But I think, dude, I mean, this is like 3 years ago. I think I found him. I don't know. He was using clever and strategic hashtags. So I found him. And I just reached out, and like, I had been doing that a lot. I was reaching out to a lot of people, and I was reaching out being like, hey, I really like what you're doing. We should set up a call and just explore. So Matt and I ended up on a call. We were like, hey, we're doing the same thing. Like, we really believe passionately in this idea of creating content that speaks to experiences. This is cool. So we would have a call, and then we'd be like, all right, cool, good stuff. Let's not force anything. Let's talk and create. So we didn't be like, oh, let's form a company, right? That's not the right mentality. But over the course of like 6 months, we worked together, got to know each other, and then from there, Matt met Adam and Matthew Torin, who are they're legends in the online marketing world. But they founded Young Entrepreneur. They have a bunch of different successful ventures under their belt. They're advisors and mentors. They sit on the board and Entrepreneur. They're just altogether really, really, really good guys. But he met them at some conference, showed them what he was working on, showed them what I was working on. They're like, this is really cool. We've been wanting to work with, guys like you, and kind of this idea of a media company. So eventually we all came together, had a couple calls. We're like, all right, let's start creating together. So basically this idea of unstructured creation started to get more and more structure. We're like, all right, this is cool. Let's create this. We're like, all right, we should probably form an LLC. Formed an LLC. Let's form a holding company. Let's talk about some more structure. So eventually from there, things just came together. Now we're all, very, very firm partners. So yeah, I mean, it all started on social media. And then from there, after meeting the Torrens and Matthew and I, like from there, we just combined all of our networks. And that's where things really took off. Like, oh, I know so-and-so who can do this, and then blah. And then Adam and Matthew would introduce us to people. And then we started the podcast, and, things really took off. But it all started on social media.
It's awesome. Yeah, no, when you were growing Pursuit, what are kind of tips, or when you guys are actually doing stuff now, if somebody wanted to get into starting a media company or anything like that, what are some of the beginner tips, just because we do have a lot of young listeners?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing is differentiate between a media company and a blog, right? There's a pretty big difference. I think, starting a media company, if you're starting a media company, have a vision, right? So be like, oh, I have a blog, I'm going to start a media company around it. They're like, that is not the right mentality, because one, starting a blog is really tough. Scaling an online publication is really, really tough. If I had to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't do it. It is a grind. It is not easy to monetize consistently, keyword consistently. It is tough to maintain. There's all these different things. But I think, yeah, the advice would be diversify, right? So have a blog, that's great. Pour your talents and your resources into that, but you have to have multiple distribution channels, right? So social, email, podcasting, video, vlogging, and content, right? Or editorial content, right? So you have to be diversified, particularly from a scalability standpoint. Actually, one of the big things that I'm working on for Pursuit right now, and you're probably one of the first ones that I'm publicly telling this, but we're doing a big pivot for it. We're moving everything over to email. So this is after years of growing the call it the traffic side of the business, and just realizing the long-term vision is in a channel where you can actually truly create a relationship with a visitor, right? So like there's all these people that are in the traffic game, right? So like Distractify and like all those guys that are viral people, and they're just not there. You don't create a valuable relationship with your readers, right? They're passerbys. It's all driven by social. It's all driven by that virality, and that's not what you're creating. You look at companies like The Skim, you look at companies like The Hustle, right? They're all in on a singular channel that makes sense for their audience, that their audience is on, and that their audience resonates with. So we're doing a similar approach. I already have a pretty large list anyway. So just like kind of after taking a step back and being like, okay, as a media company, where are we going? Like, where are the resources? I'm pouring a lot of resources into things that I don't think have long-term sustainability. So that's things like, spreading our articles on Facebook and like all these different things that just to me don't make sense. So we're pivoting to all in email. But to answer your larger question, I think that's reflective of this idea of going all in on channels that make sense for your audience. So if you're going to create a media company, know who you're going to create it for, certainly, and don't create a company just to create it. Yeah, it sounds cool to say I have a media company, but what does that really mean, right? Like you have a blog, okay, you're a media company, sure, but like how many people are you reaching? How are you reaching them? And what does your content mean to that audience? Like you have to answer those types of questions up front. And then just really focus your energies where that audience actually resonates. So in my case, email, podcasting just makes more sense. So we're doing that pivot, but I think answering those questions early on will really help you get there faster.
Okay, so you mentioned that it was really hard to grow your publication, monetize it. So what were some ways that you did actually grow it and then make money off of it?
Yeah, so growing a publication, there's some like passive ways and some more active ways. So like on the more passive side, I would say like the biggest thing that's helped is obviously SEO optimization, right? If you're good at SEO, you could hire someone who's good at SEO. That'll really, really help you. So every time you create an article for your blog, making sure it's optimized to SEO, making sure you're creating content that is strategic for SEO. Creating content specifically to rank for certain words, that'll really help. So that was big for me. The other thing that was big for me was my email list, right? So email trumps everything, right? Like the best online marketers are the people with the best and largest and most engaged email list. So I started, I kind of shoot myself in the foot, but I didn't start building that list until like a year and a half in, which was, a rookie move on my part. But once I started building that list, that really, really helped, setting an expectation with your audience that you're sending an article out every morning or every other day or whatever it is, that really helps. And then from there, it's the network effect. So I have over 500 contributors. So if you were to math that out, like, you say 500 contributors, maybe call it 1,000 people in their network on average, it's a pretty big ripple effect. So getting all of your contributors to share in their networks, getting all your contributors to share in their on their email lists, on their Facebooks, whatever it is, that was huge. But I think to transition into question about monetization, but also talk about growth, another thing that helped, and I never encourage companies to try to grow by getting press, but press helps a lot. So I got front page features in Forbes and Inc. and Entrepreneur and Chicago Tribune, and I've been on WGN and CBS here in Chicago. So started locally, worked nationally. That really helped spread the word and give legitimacy. So when you can say you're, a Forbes featured podcast, or you're, entrepreneur of the week on CBS in Chicago, like that really helped. So not only did it give legitimacy, but it definitely drove a lot of traffic. But more so, it gave offers to monetize. So to answer your question about monetizing, certainly you want to have a good endorsement from a third party in order to attract clients. So that definitely helped from the get-go. I think like the best way that I've been able to monetize isn't through banner ads or anything like that. That's pennies on the dollar unless you're a big publication. The best way I've monetized is through direct deals with brands like Staples, for example. And then also through affiliates. So like affiliates is one of the best ways, I think, to monetize when you're small, because affiliates, you get paid a percentage of whatever you're selling, right? And you choose affiliates based on the niche that you're already in. So if I have a blog about lawnmowers, I'm going to go find a lawnmower affiliate, right? It's not like if I'm a lawnmower blog, I'm not going to go do an affiliate for a mattress brand, right? So you align it with your audience, and right then and there, you already know that you have a product that they're likely interested in. So it's much more likely that you're going to sell something rather than doing, an integration with Staples, which was good, and they were after just recognition and awareness, right? But no one read that article on Pursuit and then went off to Staples and bought, 1,000 pieces of paper or an office chair, right? They got awareness. That's a big brand doing it. But if you truly want to make money, like somewhat passively, you just create dope content around a subject that will resonate, and then you align that with an affiliate, right? So, affiliate marketing has been around for a long time, but I think that's the best way to approach it. And then from there, to my point earlier, like Pursuit is just one angle of how we make money on Trep, right? So things on the podcast, consulting, brand strategy, a lot of that. So basically, when we approach a brand, we're like, here's all the things that we could do for you. Oh, and also we have huge distribution. We can help you with this strategy that you're looking for. And also, if you want to get in front of 10 million people, we can help you with that. So it's a very much holistic approach that we bring to the table. I think, and granted, I'm still learning. Like to my point earlier, when I say I struggled, I really mean it. It was tough. I didn't know what I was doing. I was always very frustrated in seeing how all these other bloggers were, pulling in so much money. I was like, how are they doing this? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think what I learned is that you just got to focus on those areas that are your core competency. And I think one of the things that, like Pursuit, for example, it's a pretty broad blog, right? I focus on this idea of providing perspectives that inspire. That is not niche, right? Not really at all. Yeah, you could say it's niche in that it's a self-development space, but more than that, it's really not that niche. So right then and there, you have a challenge, right? You can do a lot of self-help type things. You can do some courses for products and things like that, but it's not as niche as this guy who runs a motorcycle blog or a guy who runs a fitness blog, right? So again, if I had to do it over, maybe more niche, right? Or maybe create channels within Pursuit that are more niche. And that's something that I've done. So I think, again, vision from the get-go, knowing those things really help. And I didn't know that. I went all in on this idea and then have adapted from there. But so a lot of different ways that you could do it, but I think it all relates to audience for sure.
Yeah, we could have just ended it right there after you said create dope content.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, if you guys take any words away from it, just create dope content. But once again, going on kind of another path here, or kind of back onto what you were saying, what is how did you build your email list? Did you run traffic? So this is where we go into the digital marketing side, right? Did you run traffic to a landing page and do a giveaway, or what was kind of your method of creating a email list?
Yeah, so initially it was through Instagram. So the largest channel we had initially was Instagram. Did a lot of quote things. This is before some of the algorithm switches, and we were growing fast. We were growing like 500 to 1,000 followers a day. So I had a big presence there, had a large following, and so basically every morning I would create these guides. So it was just basically a long form piece of content on Pursuit, and I would put out a post first thing in the morning on Instagram that would be, click the link in our bio if you want to get today's guide. So I would do that. And every time I would do that, I would get 50 to 100 email subscribers right there. And it killed it. So that was how I initially built it. From there, it was just all value driven from the site. I did some things with like referrals and, refer a friend and get XYZ. It worked all right. But, the more you incentivize people, the more likely you are to get people who don't really add value to your list and they're just there for the incentive. So, I built it predominantly off of Instagram. It drove, the highest opt-in rate and also the most engaged of my users. And, over time, I've deleted a lot of people off my list. I think you need to be pretty savage with your list. You need to make sure, if you're leaving inactive people on your list, you're going to kill your delivery rate. So you gotta shoot people off there. So I did a big, call it Hunger Gamesing of my list the other month. Got rid of a lot of people, but yes, focus on the channels that make sense for you. Instagram made a lot of sense. I drive a lot of opt-ins through my Instagram stories right now, and just continue to drive that out. But to my point earlier about email, we are doing a bit of a pivot right now. So the big thing that's going to drive email for us more so than it has in the past is this idea of ambassadors or referrals. So more to come on that. But again, the best way to drive loyal subscribers or loyal visitors or loyal users is through word of mouth from existing loyal readers or subscribers. So we're leveraging that idea moving forward.
Case, it's awesome how you were able to build out an email list like that. That's such a skill set that so many people need to learn. But let's take us over to the e-commerce side of things now. Let's hear that.
Yeah, for sure. E-commerce certainly, admittedly, is not a strong suit of mine. It's not something that I have a lot of experience with, but it's been at the top of my hit list for a while. I think as a core pillar of being successful as a media company, you need to have, your own products that you can control, distribute, fulfill, and sell. So it's been something that I've certainly done before. Matt and I have been very successful last year in selling a couple digital products that did very, very well. We did, over 6 figures of sales, but it was different play, right? It wasn't an offline product. It was relationship building via our list and then selling a course in a community. So it was very different. So I launched the other week an e-commerce brand called Nevermind, NVRMIND, shopnevermind.com. It's basically printed, artistic, and stylized canvases. It's really cool stuff. But it's a physical product that is sold via an e-commerce store. So I had proved out the interest in this via pursuit and just via the motivational angle and the quotes and everything. It just made sense to launch it with this. But it's not something I have a lot of experience with, right? Optimizing in sales and conversion and all that stuff isn't a huge strong suit of mine. So I launched 10 days ago, and the feedback has been really good, right? So I have the sales that we've gotten for it have all come from organic channels, right? So Instagram and Facebook and the content itself and the email list. So from there, it's how do we scale that, right? How do we continue to leverage our audience that we have and don't have to pay for? And then also, how do we translate that into a paid audience? How do we leverage insights from who's buying our product through our own channels into the paid opportunities? So that's really what I'm working on now. It's pretty exciting. I think it's definitely essential as a media company to have an e-commerce aspect, to have your own products to sell. You look at some of the large e-commerce or the large publishing companies today, and they all have this element. It's pretty crucial. So working on that now, it's really exciting. The ability to create a product whenever I need to balance a need or to match a need and just learn from there. So I think you talk to me in 2, 3, 4 weeks, I think we'll have learned a lot and really optimize that. But for now, it's all about learning, right? It's all about understanding what are the products that people are gravitating towards that are in our existing distribution, and then how can we scale beyond that and to create products specifically for subsets of targets to leverage Facebook ads and go from there. So it's very exciting. I think Nevermind is going to be very successful. And right now we're 10 days in, and it's definitely proving that way. It's just now how do we scale that further?
That's awesome, Case, because I'm actually really interested in e-commerce also, but I'm curious, are you guys drop shipping your products?
Yes, of course. In the future might not, but right now, as we're learning who the audience is, it makes sense, right? It doesn't make sense to pony up a lot for distribution and for manufacturing and fulfillment on our end. I'm willing to take the margin hit to learn rather than to have to incur that. Yeah. So we have a good company that handles the printing and the manufacturing of our product, as well as the fulfillment.
That's awesome. So if someone like myself, if I wanted to start my own e-commerce store, what are some like first beginner steps that someone should be taking in order to do so? Like, do you recommend marketing just like on Instagram, Facebook? Like, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is just learn from existing brands that are doing well. Like, I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. I think you definitely want to start in a proven market. You certainly don't want to start in a super competitive market. Like, I wouldn't advise like right now to go and start, selling fidget spinners, right? Like, that's diluted and tapped, but like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, there's other people selling stylized canvases right now and they're doing well. So I took that concept, made it my own, made it unique. And now I'm leveraging what I'm seeing that they're doing and making it my own. So they're very successful on Instagram. So I'm focusing on Instagram. It's a very visual social media outlet. It makes a lot of sense for my audience. My audience is on there. Makes sense to showcase the product. So I'm on there as well. So yeah, so I think it's about find a brand that you want to be like, that you're similar to. And, I don't want to say copy what they're doing, but copy what they're doing. Copy their distribution strategy, copy how they're talking to their audiences, figure out who their audience is. There's a lot that you could do, from competitive conquesting to, the understanding how they're targeting their audience, who they're targeting, what kind of ad products they're using, what kind of channels, how their site is set up. There's so much you can learn from other brands that you could do in a completely fair and just logical way. It makes sense. You want to copy from the best and then make it your own. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say. And then from there, it's just incremental learnings, right? Unfortunately, e-commerce is a pay-to-play space, right? Unless you have large distribution channels or some kind of organic way of going viral, of which there are certainly ways, but you need to have that content mastered. If that's not the case, it's a pay-to-play, but it's a $5 pay-to-play, right? Spend $5 testing different audiences every day, figure out what's resonating, and then optimize. I also think like the biggest thing is, learn as much as you can yourself, but you can always outsource and leverage someone who's better at it than you. Like, I hired someone to help me with my ads because I want to learn from the best and I want to move as fast as possible. So I'm willing to bite that charge up front and make it back quickly. So I hired someone, he's along there every step of the way, helping me, informing me, consulting with me, and going from there. And I think like all in, just like outside of e-commerce and publishing in general, like I think I had a little bit a chip on my shoulder when I first started. I was like, I could do this all myself. I can learn it all myself. And while I think that's entirely possible, I think bring someone in as early as you can to mentor you, advise you, consult with you, either on a paid or a non-paid basis. And that'll help just accelerate your growth. I think my best advice to starting your e-commerce store is learn from other brands. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and then test, and then also learn from the best.
Chase, kind of just closing things down here, what is kind of your best piece of advice you could give to our young entrepreneurs listening?
Yeah, good question. I think the best piece of advice would be like, don't try to be an entrepreneur. I see so many people that are like 17 that I look at their Twitter and it says entrepreneur. I'm like, oh, cool. So like, tell me about the companies that you've started and that you've grown, and tell me about all this revenue. And they're like, oh, I'm blah, blah, blah. Like, what? Like, there's such a emphasis on people wanting to be entrepreneurs that they're kind of casting aside what it really means. And all it really means is starting something from scratch, right? So my best advice would just get started with something, and don't try to fit yourself into this role of being an entrepreneur. That will come. You can call yourself an entrepreneur once you have your first 6-figure, 7-figure company, right? Don't get so caught up in wanting to be an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur kind of sucks, to be honest with you. It's stressful. You're doing a lot. Like, it's tough, but like, it's very glamorized nowadays. Like, everyone wants to be in Forbes or Entrepreneur or Inc. or on the front page of the newspaper, and that's cool, and that will come. But if you're so focused on being an entrepreneur, I think you're missing out on a lot of what goes into it, which is actually putting in the work, actually executing, not just talking about it, not just, talking about your vision for a company, but actually getting down to it and proving it. So I think my advice is just get started, start humbly, start with a lot of humility, and just put in the work. And eventually, you can call yourself an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur from the day that you start putting in the work, but don't get so caught up in the title and being the CEO of your company. I think it's the craziest thing when I see, someone start a blog and they call themselves the CEO. Like, to me, that's just emblematic of the larger issue. Just start creating, start making money, and then just let it go from there. But in order to do that, you just have to start. So that would be my best advice.
Case, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you at?
Yeah, for sure. Case@pursuit.com would be easiest. That's PRSUIT.com. Any of our social handles at Pursuit, at the Daily Pursuit, LinkedIn, pretty much everywhere. But it all starts at Pursuit.com. You can find me there on the About page, on the contact page, or just shoot me an email. Or actually, for some reason, I never started my own personal Instagram account. So you can find me at case.kenny on Instagram.
Guys, you can find Case more directly at Pursuit.com. You can find that at Instagram at Pursuit.com, or just type it into your URL. You guys can also find us over at dr2sierra.com. Saba, what are some final words?
Case, thank you so much for coming on today. You gave a lot of valuable information, so definitely connect with him, guys. But that is all we have today on Dorm Rooms to Conference Rooms.
Thank you, Case.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Dorm Rooms and Conference Rooms. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you haven't joined our accelerator program yet, you can find that at livetogrind.com/college, where we connect you with today's latest influencers and experts in their fields.